Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to author education, working hand in hand with indies, a session that was presented at Winter Institute 2025 in Denver, Colorado.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. It is 11 o'clock and we are going to be prompt. Thank you so much for being here. I know that it is an adventure to get to this room, so give yourselves a round of applause. You've already done a big hurdle. You've proven that you have what it takes to find any bookstore. Welcome to the author education panel, working hand in hand with indies. We are very excited to have you here because we love authors. Thank you so much. We couldn't do what we do without what you do. We are going to do a little housekeeping. This is something that ABA does at every session, so you might see things like this if you attend other sessions. A reminder that the app, that's a popping pea. The app has the slides, so you can refer to those in the future from there, and also the program. So a big thing this year is we love data. So ABA gets better from your input. Please fill out a session survey to let us know what we did well and what we could improve on. I hear that there might be a little competition going this year, that the session that gets the most response gets some sort of an award. So, I'm being a little selfish here. It doesn't have to be a good review. It just has to be a review. And just so you know, recordings will be available on the ABA's website, bookweb.org, and also on the podcast, Booked, which is book and then ED. So we are recording it, and it's really important then that we silence our cell phones, which I should make sure I've done that myself. I know we all are catching up so much in the middle, in between things. And then also that when you have something to share with the room, you wait until you have a microphone in front of you to share it, because that will ensure that it is recorded for posterity. And we have Emily here, who is being our microphone handler. Thank you so much. She has helped us so much in preparing this panel, and so it's great to have her here as a part of it. And we will try to make sure that you can hear us well through our microphones, and that way the recording audience will also hear. And also, because we are a trade organization, we have to remember that booksellers are encouraged to share ideas and support each other during the conference, but the Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits us from discussing price or pricing policies, boycotts, or dividing up the market. And there's full information on BookWeb, but this is pretty much going to cover what we need to think about. And the session description, you probably saw it already. That's why you're here. Just to give you an overview of what we're going to be doing, we're going to introduce ourselves. We have a very great panel here, booksellers and authors. We're going to talk about why long-term relationships with bookstores matter. We're going to talk about what to do before, during, and after an event. And we're going to share some tips on maintaining a relationship with bookstores year-round. So not just when you have a release, not just when you're touring, but staying in contact year-round. And then we'll conclude, and we'll have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. And again, just a reminder to make sure to use the microphone when we are at the question and answer session. So here we are. I'll start off since I've got the floor, as we say. I'm Tegan Tagani. I'm from Queen Anne Book Company in Seattle. We are a general bookstore, about 2,400 square feet. That might not mean anything to anyone, except that it means that we have to roll everything out of the way to make room when we do in-store events, if we're going to have seating. So that's something we'll get to, is expectations of, could we do a cocktail party, or do you need an audience sitting down? We are a general bookstore, but in this photo, you can see me in our children's section because I'm our children's book buyer. I'm also president of the ABA board. So I represent booksellers that way. And I am going to ask everyone on this panel 2 questions as we get introduced, because I think it's a great way to get to know one another, of what's a favorite book that we've been reading, And what is a favorite author event that you've either attended or hosted? And so I will lead by example here. And a book I am championing right now that I read recently that I love. I'm going to be one of those teasers. It doesn't come out until July, but pre-order campaigns with the bookstores are a real thing, and I want that to be in your head because I want to let you know I'm so excited about Jazzy the Witch in Broom of Doom. This is a children's graphic novel, and it is by one of our customers and one of our beloved authors and illustrators, Jessica Bagley. It is coming from Simon & Schuster Kids, and it's fantastic because it's about a little witch who is having a really hard time learning how to ride her broom. And does she even want to? So it's a lot about growing up and figuring out who you are. And kind of related to that, one of my favorite author events was Jessica Bagley's event with us for her picture book called Maurice, which is set in Paris, and it's about a dog who plays the accordion. And we had an accordion player outside to lure people into the store for the event, and that's part of why I loved it so much. Okay, so now on to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex George. I'm the co-founder of Skylark Bookshop, which is in, you wouldn't ever guess it from the accent, Columbia, Missouri. And we've been open for coming up for 7 years now. We're a general purpose bookstore. And we're having a good time doing it. I'm also the founder of the Unbound Book Festival, which is a book festival that takes place in Columbia. This year in April is going to be our 10th year of doing that. That's a big part of how I spend my time, particularly around about this time of year. But I think probably the reason why I was invited to participate on this panel is that I'm also a novelist. I've published 3 books in the US, 2 with Penguin, 1 with Macmillan. The last one was in 2020, May 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. We shall say no more about that. And that was called The Paris Hours. And so I've sort of had experience of the whole author event thing from both sides. In terms of books that I champion, I mean, one of my favorites, it's been out for a little while now. It's called Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, which is an absolutely astonishing book. I highly recommend it. If you ever find that you find a poet who has written a novel, read that novel. Because an ocean is another good example of that, of course. So that is a book that I just adore. And then in terms of favorite author events, so the second year that we did Unbound, Salman Rushdie was our keynote speaker. And he flew in from New York. And I was told very specifically that he would do 90 minutes and not a minute more. He was one of the most generous speakers I've ever encountered, and he talked for at least 2.5 hours, took every question. But the thing that I remember the most was that he walked out onto the stage to a standing ovation. He cleared his throat and he said, well, on my way here, on the plane, I finished a short story. Would you like to hear it? And the noise that audience made was something I will never forget. It was just wonderful. So there, that's my story.
Fantastic.
Hi, my name is Alyssa. I work for Steamy Lit. We are a romance literary collective. We've been open for 4 years, and we have 2 brick and mortars at the moment, one in Deerfield Beach, Florida, and one in Tampa, Florida. And my favorite book right now is High Sticking the Heart by Marie Maravilla. It's an indie book. And my most favorite author event, we've done 2 very notable events within the community. Kennedy Ryan, we did a brunch for her right after the release of This Could Be Us. And she also made the New York Times bestseller during that week. So it was a really big event, and we were really happy to have her for it. And then we did a Abby Jimenez event for yours truly, and there were goats at this event. So it was about 150 people, the hottest day in Florida, like ever, and baby goats running around the store. So yeah,
we can get goats for our event. Notes now. Notes about goats. Hi, I'm Lindsay Lynch. I work at Parnassus Books in Nashville, Tennessee, which is owned by Ann Patchett. I don't know our square footage, and I really should, but I can't remember numbers, which is troubling because I'm the inventory manager. So don't tell my boss that. I have worked as the adult book buyer / inventory manager since 2021. I have been a bookseller at Parnassus on and off since 2014. I've had all the jobs in the store at some point, pretty much, except for owning the store. I am also an author. My debut novel, Do Tell, came out with Doubleday Books in 2023. It was an Indie Next pick because focusing on indie bookstores was, for obvious reasons, a pretty important priority for me. And see, a book I've really enjoyed right now. I recently staff read Mutual Interest by Olivia Wolfgang Smith, which is a turn of the century lavender marriage story. It's super great. It's super great historical fiction. All I have to say is queer historical fiction, and I'm in. And a favorite author event, I'm going to selfishly pick one that I was the conversation partner for. Last year, I got to be in conversation with Christina Enriquez for The Great Divide, which turned into, I hadn't met her before. I had minimal contact beforehand, and we just had the best conversation, nerding out over historical research, writing longhand. It was just one of those really wonderful, great natural conversations.
I love that. I think that that's a really interesting segue of when you first meet an author, you hope to develop a long-term relationship. Should we talk a little bit about why long-term relationships with bookstores matter, of what an author can do to establish that relationship?
Take this one. Parnassus, we're really lucky in Nashville. We have a lot of authors who, both we have done their launch events, but also we have sustained these long-term relationships with them. Certainly we want to meet you if you are a local author. Parnassus, we're really lucky in that we have great sales reps who, as the buyer, are very, very good at giving me a heads up if anybody lives in the area. So that way, when I place front list orders usually 3-4 months ahead of pub date. So that way, when I'm placing that order for the store, they will let me know. And if I see that local author, I will pretty much immediately bump up those numbers. I don't know if that's the case with every bookstore, but in my case as a buyer, I am always going to, even if we don't have an established connection with that author, if I know that, I will bump those numbers up. Even without sales reps, we always appreciate authors letting us know if they live in the area that they have a book coming out. One thing to be mindful of is just knowing who you are actually trying to contact within the store. If you cold call the store, chances are you are going to be talking to a bookseller who is excited about your book, but does not necessarily read the full pitch of your book. The person you're probably trying to get to is me. So always just be mindful when you make that contact with an independent bookstore to establish that relationship and open that up. Who you want to talk to, who is the most effective person to get that information to. So it's always helpful. I think the main things we need to know are what your name is, what your book is, when it comes out, but most importantly, how it is published, because that will change usually depending on the bookstore, how we're going to order that book, whether you are from a big five, an indie press, self-published, that information is definitely helpful to have up front.
Any other tips?
Yeah, I'd also say, one of the things that, having published books before I owned a bookstore, I had no idea of the sheer number of advanced reading copies that arrive on our doorstep every day. It is. Talk about drinking from a fire hose. It's absolutely bonkers. And there's literally no way that anybody could read even a fraction of them. So one of the things, as to the question about why these relationships are important, if you go and if you form a good relationship with booksellers across the country, that is one way that when your next arc comes in, they're going to go, oh yeah, that's right, I remember her. She was fantastic. She told that funny story about the goat or whatever it was. And so that's a way that you're going to emerge from that crowd. And so anything that you can do to sort of distinguish yourself from the others is that you're going to have more chance of somebody reading the book ahead of time and then championing it and maybe saying, we should do an event with this person. So,
could we go on to the share times? That one, the next question. I have a note for that one.
Oh, sure.
Sometimes your store has benefited.
Sure. Yeah.
So this isn't, I wouldn't say that this is the right or the wrong way, but my CEO and founder, Mel Saavedra, is exquisite in her people skills. And before we had a brick and mortar, we put on a con in California, and we still have a con, but it really helped create beneficial relationships because before this con, we started the Steam box, and it was a subscription box, and you have indies trad, we do special editions in that box. And through that box, she was able to create relationships, not only with authors, but with publishing houses and publicists, etc., agents. And I think without her being intentional in those relationships, and even if someone says no, it's still that leaving the door open for them, whether it's an author, whether it's whoever it is. Without her being intentional, I don't think our brick and mortars would be able to be where they are today. I think it would take a lot longer. I mean, like I said earlier, we are only 4 years old as a company, which is crazy. But we're only 4 years old. And as the event coordinator, I'm so blessed and grateful that she has been able to create that environment to where I can step in and really say, I'm grabbing this relationship and I'm nurturing it. And even if the author says no, even if the author or publicist can't attend a certain event, right? Like, I get rejections, for events all the time. And it could be because we're in Florida. It could be because there's no money for a certain author. You know, our motto is celebrating diversity in romance. So we champion a lot of underrepresented authors, a lot of authors that don't get the big bucks to go onto tour. And just that in of itself, like maintaining those relationships, even if they don't get to go on tour, is a huge part of why we do what we do. Because without the authors, our store wouldn't function. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't. People come into the store for your books. They come into the store to see what we have available, you know, and I think it's just that initial act of, if you can talk to somebody and create a base, you can do anything with your book, truly. You can do anything in terms of owning a store.
I love that. And I think touching on rejection that's a hard thing, right?
Yes.
But also authors, if we say no to an event, it's not because we don't love you. It might be because some people are on vacation. It might be our store is too small. It might be that we can recommend another store that would be better suited for you. So please don't be offended by no's. We always wish we could say yes in our hearts. We are saying yes, but we have limited resources, space, time, and we will try our best. And I think one of the things, I was talking to some other booksellers throughout the conference, I said, what is something that you want authors to know? And it was this idea of authors and booksellers have to be relationships so that it's not as transactional. Yes, we are businesses. Yes, we have to have the money to keep this going, but it's the relationships that sustain us. Does anybody have an example of how one of your great relationships started besides Alyssa's wonderful one about the subscriptions?
Yeah, so there's been a wonderful thing in Nashville where, like, probably in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a ton of romance authors move to Nashville. We love y'all so much.
Yes, they have.
In particular, I think Lauren Congesson has been a wonderful person for the store. We helped launch her first book. But then since then, she's had 2 more books. We've done the launch events for all of those, but also she has just been such a wonderful presence in the literary community. Even between those launch events, we've had her come back as a conversation partner. We've partnered with our local writing organization, The Porch, where she's running workshops at the store. And again, those are things where, like, even if she's not in the thick of promoting a book, her books are still in the store. People are still actively engaging with her, and it is also building a community around Nashville. So I'm just going to show a lot of love to Lauren Congesson as a great example of somebody who moved to Nashville. And again, we just started with that one launch, and now we're also running huge pre-order campaigns for her.
Yes.
So that's another thing. Like, over the 3 books, those pre-order campaigns have grown exponentially. And not just within Nashville, we get orders for her books from across the country because she promotes us as a place where you can get a signed book from her.
Yep.
Do you have any?
Well, no, I mean, one thing I would say is that, as authors, if you haven't yet had your nightmare event story, you will soon. I've got a ton of them. And one of the things, just going back to what you were saying about the difference between the relationship and the transactional nature that it, like I've had, as we all authors have had some sort of fairly disastrous events, and it's fine, because even if there weren't that many people who showed up, there is this other thing, you are building a relationship with the people in the store. And in fact, that kind of adversity, because they will be having a horrible time too, you can be sure of it. And it does actually create a bond. And so, moving forward for like the next book and the next book, it is actually a form of, almost strength. And so it is more than just about the event itself, and it is about those longer term relationships.
And also the long tail that if you sign stock, the bookseller invited you to the store because they were interested in you and your book, and they will keep selling your book and maybe put it on a beautiful display because they have a lot of copies left over because people didn't get to the event for some reason. So yes, don't give up hope.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
For authors in general, I know that taking out your book is scary. It's a piece of yourself, right? That's given to the entire world at some point. And even if, like how Lindsay was saying, you're not debuting your book, you can be a conversationalist. I think that's really important. And I don't want to say it's not encouraged enough, but maybe it's not prioritized enough in certain areas. Like, one of our indie local authors, her first local signing with us, she didn't get not one person there. And that's rough for all parties around. But as the year went on, she published more books, and we got to have her for Miami Book Fair, which is a huge festival. Mm-hmm. And she was there as an author signing at our booth, which I encourage anybody to do. If you can, go to a festival and near your area, look up a festival, see if there's anybody that's doing booth signings. We reach out to a ton of authors for them for exposure purposes. And now she even led a conversation for our anniversary event. And it was a wonderful conversation. I don't think anyone could have tied in all those authors together. It was beautiful. But she was so nervous because that's nothing she's ever done before. Oh. And I just think taking that initial step is going to help her immensely, because she's also not from here. She's an Argentinian author. Mm-hmm. Her native language is Spanish. So it's also trying, right? It's that taking a step. Even on our end, we're taking a step. Hopefully this goes well. We don't know if it's going to go well, but we believe in you enough to do it. And I think just even opening yourself up to that and letting your local bookstore know, like, hey, can I come in and sign stock? Hey, can I do an event as a conversationalist or a panelist? We remember those things. So
true.
Just try.
Definitely. We do. We remember the people who help. We remember the people who help each other. And I think we're an industry of best intentions, and those matter. So that's a great point.
But we also remember the people who don't behave well.
Cautionary tale.
Never forget.
We can do some of those stories after at a bar somewhere. But let's talk about how to try to make it the best event possible. Things that the store and the author can do together to do before, during, and after an event. So let's think about what are some steps an author should take when now you've established a relationship, you've booked an event. How can we plan and prepare together? Would someone like to share about expectations, perhaps?
So I'll jump in. I mean, we as a shop have a particular way of doing events, which our customers now expect. And it's something that I sort of learned from, just basically from being an author myself. And it's and we worked out very quickly what people don't want. And what the audience doesn't want is for somebody to stand up and read for 40 minutes and then sit down again. Now, But when we talk about managing it, clarifying expectations, that's exactly, we make it very clear that isn't what we want to happen. We have a rule, and I know that we're going to talk about readings and how you select a reading in a minute, but we want to keep the readings pretty short because what the audience at Skylark expect when they come to an event is they're going to get the stories behind the story, whatever you want to call it, and that kind of conversation. Whether that is just whether that's just the author speaking or whether it's an interview or something like that. So we always make sure very early on that the authors understand that. And as an author, you need to make it very clear with the bookshop what you're comfortable with. And if you don't feel comfortable talking about your book for 20 minutes, then everybody needs to know that, because the worst thing is if you show up and say, well, I'm going to do this. Oh, no, that's actually not how we do it. So having that conversation is a very important thing to do in terms of those expectations. And, is there going to be a Q&A? Is there going to be tech? And if so, do you have a slideshow that you need? And what kind of dongle do you have? And all of these sorts of things. The more that you can get established ahead of time, the better.
Yeah, I will say, for analysis in terms of clarifying expectations and getting the word out, our analysis does have a very robust social media following. We're lucky about that. But if you as the author have an event with us and you do not, that's not something to worry about. We still want you to post about it. We will amplify that post. So part of it is, having, if you are active on social media, you don't have to be, but if you are having that tour schedule, but also when you are posting, consistently tagging the bookstore is very helpful, because that allows us to repost and amplify and get the word out. So again, even if you don't have that massive social media following, hey, we do. So we are always happy to boost whenever we have events. So tagging on social media. Also, don't be afraid to ask your publisher for things. Yep. I think as a debut author, I didn't necessarily know the scope of things I could ask for. I remember I made my own Instagram slides for my tour, and my agent emailed me. She's like, "Did you make those yourself? Why didn't you ask the publisher to do that? They can do that for you." So I think it's definitely, the publisher can say no, but it's always worth reminding that yourself that you can ask for things. That is okay. The worst thing that can happen is that they'll say they can, and then you just hop on Canva and go wild.
Right.
What about great tips on social media? What about one's website? Do you have some tips about things that an author can do to prepare on the website, specifically maybe with links?
Sure. Go ahead.
A contact page, and a thorough contact page. If your message system, because it's please send me a message, and then you have that one. If it doesn't work or it's really sketchy, whatever, it's hard, but give an email that you're not afraid to look into, yes. Right? Because I know that as an author, there's people out there, unfortunately, that don't know how to separate the art from the person, right? And it's gracious when you guys have your emails out like that. I couldn't imagine. We have a physical events email, because if I were to get an email, I think I would cry. But just making sure that your contact page is up to date and that it's something you can check, even if it's every other day. I know as an author, as you you're itching to kind of see certain things, and then you're itching not to see certain things. So, but just that in itself, I'm a constant message person. I don't do DMs on Instagram. That's a huge, my Instagram is for myself, and I'm not in touch with our Steamy Lit, because our social team is our social team and they handle everything. So I don't do DMs. I just physically work through email. And if you have my number, that's, a different thing. But I think making sure your contact page is completely up to date and that you're comfortable with what's on there is pretty important.
And I'll add one other thing, and everybody you talk to today will tell you this. If you have, and you should have on your websites, links to buy the book, please, if you have to put Amazon on there, put it at the bottom of the list and not at the top of it. I actually had a fight with my publishers, and they actually very reluctantly agreed that I didn't have to put an Amazon link on there. But goodness me, that was a tough one. They were very unhappy about it. But so think about that. Links to the whether it's. I mean, what would be really great would be if you're doing a small tour to put links to all of the books shops that you're going to, and depending upon whether they have indie commerce or or whether they use bookshop.com, you can work that out. And we use indie commerce, so every book that you are writing has its own page on our website, so you can find that and link that. But that's an important part as well.
Yeah, at Parnassus, we do RSVPs for our events. They're either RSVP or ticketed, so that's another reason why those links are super helpful, so that people are going to that RSVP link, and we have a head count for how many people are planning to attend the event. In the past, we've had authors do their own private RSVPs, and then a week ahead of the event, you're like, oh no, my own RSVP is actually quite long. We're like, oh, that would have been good to know.
Yes.
So definitely linking to the store's event page is very, very helpful.
Well, and just that communication again, it keeps coming up, right? Expectations and communications. And thinking about the audience as a children's book person, it's super important to think about what kind of an audience and communicate with the bookstore. Who's going to be there? For example, we had a preschool who would come, and so they might not realize that the bulk of the kids will be ages 3, 4, and 5. They might be thinking that they're going to get toddlers or they're going to get 8-year-olds. And so just thinking about that, thinking about where else you are having events. So which overlap is there, trying not to step on other bookstores' toes as you're planning your tours. There are ways to differentiate your events so that that doesn't happen. You can do different things at different stores, even if they're close, and then everybody's on the same page and nobody's getting snippy at each other. And then also just, I see this wonderful image that is from your store, right? Yes. The Steamy created this, but also maybe authors should be doing other things that can help promote the events, like inviting friends.
Oh.
Other tips?
Yeah, so something we see a lot in Florida, just because of where we're located on one of our coasts, is Miami is not a big South Florida city is not a big driving. They don't want to drive 40 minutes to go to an event. And we're working on a Miami store. But it's interesting to see that dynamic and what author they'll go out for and drive up for and what author they won't. And gets me a little upset, but it's fine. I think in helping, so like how Lindsay was saying about social media, right? And helping social media wise, if you post and you have a following, that's great. But also I would ask the team, is my book tour going to be posted for you guys? Or are you guys going to be promoting in any way? Because some bookstores don't have that online social media presence. And it's okay for you to ask. I think having a list of questions that you go in and ask, is there, we send out social media graphics like this to publicists, authors, because we make them. We make them for ourselves and we make them for you so that you are able to promote in any way possible. If you want to go and drop it off at a library, you can go do that. You have that accessibility because we already gave that to you. But that's not to say every bookstore does. And I think just going and knowing what you would like for your bookstore stop is a very good way to start off.
Can I add one thing that's just occurred to me? I just remembered George Saunders, when he was touring for Lincoln in the Bardo, somebody in the publicity department at his publisher had an absolute genius idea, which was to invite local authors to play the roles for the reading of the other characters in the book. And I think George was Lincoln. But one of the reasons why that was so genius, apart from the fact that it was very entertaining, was that all of those people said, you've got to come because I'm going to be on the stage with George Saunders and it's going to be awesome. And so roping, if you're going to a place and you know somebody there, who lives close by, who, for example, might be willing to interview you, then in doing that, in asking them, because then they will bring people along as well. So anything that you can do to rope people in who will have their own constituency of people who they might invite who might otherwise not have come is a really good idea.
That's great.
We can talk about conversation partners. I think that's also a really, really good route for getting the word out.
Absolutely.
I've seen conversation partners, like it's a very collaborative thing. Like sometimes it's the bookstore, sometimes it's the publisher, sometimes it's the author themselves. I think particularly with debuts at Parnassus, when we have an event, we're very, very conscientious about conversation partners because we know name recognition might not be there. We will try our best to find, I think of them as kind of like an anchor conversation partner of somebody who the community knows. It's not that we don't doubt that you can bring people up yourself. It is, again, I've been a debut. I know how it goes. It is just that you are new to the industry. People might not know your name. So that is also another avenue to go, is thinking about conversation partners in terms of somebody who can, again, both amplify, get the word out, but also bring people in.
So all these relationships. So now let's think about what's happening during an event. Some very concrete things that you can think of to make the event as successful and easy as possible, because some people are not very comfortable with the microphone. Some people love it, some don't. What are some of the tips we have? Make a plan for the signing line. So just saying, what's the layout when you get to the store? So I would say show up early. That's on the list. Show up early. Know you've communicated with the store ahead of time, so you know if there's parking, if there isn't parking. You know what they're expecting of you, but you know where to go and who to ask for when you get there. Some stores are very small and it'll just be one person. Some stores are very big and there might be a special desk you have to go to sort of check in. But the signing line is, do you want to give some tips about how to make a signing line easier on yourself?
Well, so one thing I would say is that always, and I do mean always, check. If someone gives you their name, check the spelling. So my mother is called Alison. I thought I knew how to spell my mother's name. Since I've started publishing books, I've found probably 10 different ways of spelling the name Alison. So always, always check, because there's nothing worse than starting off and they go, oh no, it's actually a Y. And so that's the thing. So always check that. And then if we
do Post-it notes in our store.
Post-it notes can be very helpful as well. I was once at a bookstore in Alabama and a lady came in who was Romanian, and I don't believe there was a vowel anywhere in sight. And so that was one time when it was just you're just going to have to write it down, because I'm not going to manage otherwise.
Yeah, I think during an event, I think it's important to manage your expectations, right? So making sure that you're getting there early, you find yourself organized, you know who you're going to talk to. The Post-its, it's good if the staff is available to do it for you. So we as staff members do it for our authors that are there. If they're indie authors or just lesser known, or because indies sometimes aren't as known as other authors, although that's kind of changing. So we're very excited about it. But it ends up happening that, how Alex was saying, just ask how to spell their names, because, or if they want it personalized or signed, you kind of get that little media training as you go. But I think just doing those little things are really important. Having a conversation with a person for a minute, right? And a minute and a half, that could also be the entire changing of your career. So I think that, and finding a signature that you can do quick.
Yes.
And or you're comfortable with.
I have not the signature you put on checks.
Yes. That's I've learned that is essential when it comes to the signing lines. That if it moves a certain route, because in my head I can be okay, they can sign 60 signs in a minute, or a minute per sign. And then I see someone like Allie Hazelwood, who beats the record. I mean, that girl can move I don't know how she does it because she also draws cats sometimes on her books. But her signature changed over time too, because at one point you just can't, depending on how popular you are. And you want to be able to talk to everybody for the most part, if you're comfortable.
And maybe
rephrase that. If you're comfortable.
That's exactly it. And then do you have some sort of, has anyone ever had kind of a like, help me signal that an author will give them of like, I need help cutting off this person. Yeah. So sometimes I like to establish that as kind of like having a safe word or something of like, if I do this, please get me out of this conversation, help me move this person along because they're taking too much time. And staff should be kind of around you to help with that and sense that. But maybe if you feel like you're nervous about that, establish that ahead of time, and it's something you won't have to worry about. You'll be like, all right, they're on the lookout for that.
I'll be the show up early person. At Houses, I think we pretty much standard have authors pre-sign ahead of an event. So whatever stock we have, we'll have authors try to show up like 30 minutes early. If there's like a pre-order situation, sometimes we'll be closer to an hour, which I find really, really nice for a lot of reasons. And this is also something that if you're doing an event and this isn't this bookstore's procedure, like you can also just ask them, can I pre-sign the books ahead of time? That both means that if people need to cut out at the end of the event, it's nothing personal, but they can still get a signed copy. And if they want to hang around the signing line and have you personalize the book afterwards, that works too. But I also find that as a conversation partner, it's really, really nice to kind of have that, 10-30-minute buffer time to sort of get comfortable, establish a rapport, go over what you're going to talk about. Anytime I'm a conversation partner, I will ask the author, are there any things that you're just sick of talking about, you just don't want to talk about? So that I find that time is really, really nice, both in terms of establishing how the event is going to go, kind of ground rules, but also just getting comfortable and kind of getting warmed up before you have to step out in front of a bunch of people and start talking.
I've got one other piece of advice as far as the signing line goes, which is have, if you can, so that you don't have to think. So unless you're David Sedaris, if someone says write something funny, it's totally okay to say no to that. But what I do suggest is that you have a handful of phrases that you can use when you're signing. So you're not just signing your name. You're just like some pun or something. And if it's related to the book, then so much the better. Have 2 or 3 of those, and then you can just rotate them as need be. And then you've always got something to say other than just writing your name.
That's very fun. We touched on picking a passage for reading, and we're getting a little short on time. So thank you for already bringing that up. One of the other things that we talked about in our preparation is that dialogue-heavy scenes can be difficult to read aloud to a group without a lot of context. And unless you're a voice actor, it can be difficult to follow when you're just listening along. So that's something to keep in mind. Any quick tips on what to pick?
I mean, I'll just say, if you can do something from the beginning of the book, so you don't have to spend 5 minutes of exposition explaining what's going on. If you can do something funny, you may not be able to, depending upon your book, but that's always good. But I know it's hard because you want to have something that's representative of the book, but what you really want to do is just to light a fire under these folks and to really get them excited. So, and I know that I think there's a note in here somewhere about ending, sort of doing something towards the end of a chapter, so there's a cliffhanger type situation going on as well.
Michelle Norris did that in an event at Seattle Arts and Lectures, that she started telling an anecdote from her book. And she said, but you're just going to have to buy the book outside the auditorium to find out how it ends. And it worked. And be yourself, be authentic, unless you are like Lemony Snicket and you need to have an alter ego. But I think it is so important for your readers to feel like they've met you when they come to an event. So we've had a great event or a not so great event, but we've made connections. What are some ways to follow up afterwards to keep these connections going and to let the bookstore know they're appreciated?
I'm the handwritten note person, which can be a task right off if you're buying stationery. I say this both as an author, but also as a bookseller. This works on me every time. I love it. I love receiving a handwritten note. I think we all do. We still get starstruck. We love a handwritten note. And it can just be to like the whole bookstore. You can just say like just a quick like, thank you, Parnassus folks. This was a great event. Not mandatory, but it is a nice thing. And it is something that we tend to remember and might encourage those booksellers to keep hand selling your book. Yeah, and then also posting on social media. Again, tag the bookstore. Also tag your publisher. That's another before and after. Because again, with that social media following, like the publisher probably has a nice social media following, and they will also amplify. And you can also ask booksellers to take a picture during the event, which I forgot to do at almost all of my events.
And that is the whole selfie with the audience thing. People love that. They love to see themselves if you then post it. The other thing that I would suggest in terms of, again, this goes back to creating those relationships. Ask the booksellers to sell you a book. Go and ask them what they're reading, what they're excited about, and become a customer of that shop, and they will love you forever.
True.
It's expensive, and your suitcase gets heavy, but it is totally worth it.
Yeah, I think the customer part is very nice. We've not a lot of people sometimes are able to come to our shop since we're down in South Florida, and a lot of the authors that do, they get more excited about shopping than really for the event, which is nice to see. Authors being readers, it's fabulous to see, really. And like how Lindsay was saying, make sure that your publisher is being tagged in everything. Make sure that they see the effort that y'all are doing, because that is tremendous. And even as an indie, make sure that people see the effort that you're putting in for your book, that you believe in this, that this is, it's for the public, but it's for yourself too. Because if you don't try, you're doing yourself a disservice in that way also.
I think that's great too, the idea of kind of scrapbooking and remembering and thinking about what went well in that event and what do I want to keep growing with that momentum. How about some tips on maintaining a relationship with bookstores year round? We want to make sure that authors stay fresh in our minds, so we're recommending your books from our shelves and also looking for those arcs when the next one comes out. What are some ways that authors have kept in touch with you that have been meaningful?
I can get back on my note writing.
Yes!
Yeah.
I've written off a lot of stationery. Again, for my book, my debut, this was ahead of the book being published, but I had a whole spreadsheet of booksellers who I wrote notes to, the way that I went about this. And again, I kind of cheated because I do have access to a lot of information as a book buyer. So I can see a few things that maybe you can't see, but I will still tell you. You can go on independent bookstores' websites pretty much all the time. They will have staff recs listed from their booksellers, often with the bookseller's name. So I found a really, really effective tool was to look through my comp titles. So the year my book came out, I think a couple months ahead, Anthony Marr's Mercury Picture Presents had been published, which was a really, really solid comp for my book, historical fiction, Golden Age Hollywood. So I basically went through and I looked for every bookseller who had written a staff rec, who had been excited about that book, and I wrote them a note saying, hey, I saw you wrote a staff rec for Anthony Marra. I think you might be interested in my book. ARCs might be available for your sales rep. If you don't have a print one, you can download it. That's a really effective tool because I know a lot of publishers are cutting down on print ARCs. So it's very helpful to be able to tell booksellers, if you go on Edelweiss or NetGalley, my book is available for download. So that way you're not mailing out a bunch of books. You can still just mail a note. And then I still have that list. So when, fingers crossed, I hopefully have another book, you better believe I will go back to that list and see all the booksellers who, I also write thank you notes if I notice somebody staff recs my book. So again, and this is, public information. I'm not going in and literally addressing them to the bookseller name. So you don't feel creepy doing that. But again, any bookseller who wrote a staff rec for my book, when hopefully I have that second book, I will go back to that list and I will write them another note saying, thank you so much for reading my first book. I appreciate your support. I want to let you know I have another book coming out. Again, with the similar, you can download it on Edelweiss, find it there, or look for Bernard ARCs through your sales rep.
And I just can't emphasize the effect that has, the sort of thing that Lindsay is doing. I mean, we have a fairly new bookseller in the shop called Liz, who's wonderful. And she, a couple of weeks ago, started, I think she got 2 in a week of these notes. And she was like floating on air. I mean, really, we are, as Lindsay said, we're still starstruck by the authors who come through our doors, and we're thrilled to hear from you. I also just want to shout out: is Kelsey Cox here? Okay, so I know that her book's in the galley room. So her husband, and I realize not everyone has a husband like Kelsey's, but he's an artist, and he painted a picture of the front of Skylark. Oh. And they sent it to us and said, well, this book is coming out, and you can be sure that my business partner is reading her arc now. So if you can do something like, if you have an artistic partner or something different that you can do that really sets you apart, do it. Leverage everything you've got in terms of, because like I say, there's so much coming out. We have so much, anything that you can do to distinguish yourself. And if you do it when you don't have a book coming out on the subject of actually sort of the year round thing, that's even better, because it's like, oh, this is simply that they just wanted to reach out. So.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that goes back to how, like you send out Christmas cards, right?
Yes.
You send out these sort of things to like keep in touch with people that you don't really see often. And not to say if you're not comfortable, like don't send us your Christmas card if you're not comfortable with it. But I think just doing that, like as bookstores in general, we don't expect it because we're so go in certain areas of our life that getting something in the mail, like for example, we just hosted a wedding at our bookstore, and I thought they sent us a thank you note, and I was like, oh, this is great. They posted us on Instagram. I was like, this is on. Okay. And I'm already moved on to the next thing because I don't have time. But I don't have time for anything at this point. But we got in actually flowers from them, and they were addressed to me as the event coordinator and our staff. And I was like, who is sending me flowers? I don't have a boyfriend. So I was like, who is sending me flowers? But just that, it goes very unexpected. As our boss and CEO, she took a chance on having a wedding because we obviously don't want to disappoint them. This is their special day. And like seeing that is something very nice also. So I think even if you aren't able to send a thank you note before, maybe I'm looking forward to my trip at a stop on the store, because we know that once you're on tour, it's go. And coming back from tour, it's kind of like a post-trip blues. I'm only assuming people get, because I get them. And then, so sending it beforehand maybe is the way to go rather than after. Be like, I'm excited to go to your store. I have X, Y, and Z coming out within the next few months, or, little things like that. If you're comfortable and if, you can do it, because sometimes you can't.
Can I have one more thing? Yeah. Just very quickly, the other things and this, I'm sure you all do this anyway because you're writers, but whenever you go to a new city or a new place, find the independent bookstore, go in and just say hi. Just introduce yourself. I mean, I'm English. It's very difficult for me to do that. But I have sort of made myself over the years do it, and I will just go in and say, yeah, I'm here. And they'll remember you. They will remember you. And especially if you're going in when you don't have something to sell, you're just going in because you love books. So.
And I will say, James Ponte, the children's author from Florida, does that very well. And he always takes a picture of himself outside the store when he's traveling. So when he has an event coming up, he has a picture of himself already there to promote with. And it's such a great idea. And I also want to say, Alyssa, you deserve all the flowers.
Oh,
there is a bookstore event toolkit on the ABA's website. You as authors might not have access to this, but if you know that it exists, you can point it out to the booksellers that you are working with. So you can do that if you need to. And I want to make sure that we have time for question and answers. Please do remember to raise your hand and wait for the mic to arrive. And I also want to remind you now, before the flurry of leaving the room happens, that please do rate this session for us so that we get your input. So any questions from the audience? Emily's gonna.
Hi. So I have a question about if an author is attending an event, somewhere like a conference and there's an opportunity to sell books, do you have suggestions on the best way to approach a bookstore to ask if they would be interested in partnering with something like that?
Well, so I'll jump in. Usually it would be the conference organizer who would reach out to us. And we do that a lot. We just did one last week with teachers who, well, it doesn't matter what they were. Anyway, so we do it a lot. But so if you have that, then rather, I mean, you could reach out to the bookstore, but what I would suggest would be you reach out to the conference organizer and have them reach out to the bookstore. Putting my bookstore owner hat on, I would be grateful for that as well, because that's establishing a connection between the bookstore and the conference people, which is obviously, well, one hopes might go on even after the next year when you're no longer there. So it's not really, shouldn't really be your job to do that. You should have the conference people reach out.
I'm just wondering if you have any advice or suggestions if we get an aggressive question from the audience, whose responsibility it is to deal with that and how we might go about dealing with it.
Yeah, so luckily we haven't had a lot of moments like that. Our space is very respectful, thankfully, but I do know it's something that can happen in a lot of bigger settings, a lot of bigger bookstores that don't have the care that it takes. I think before, a little bit in preparation, establish things that you don't want to talk about. Establish things that maybe you're not comfortable with. And then that way the person in charge of the event could kind of be like, I wouldn't say like not answering that, but they could kind of be like, hey, we're not doing questions of this nature, so please refrain from asking questions X, Y, and Z. Again, if you have someone that it still asks it, because you're going to have people that, just might not care. You can tell them straight up, just be like, I'm not comfortable answering that. And you could say, the next question, please. And I think it's almost respectful. People respect that. They respect boundaries nowadays. We're a big boundary century at this point. So I think if you have yours, make sure they're known. I don't think anybody should be mad at you for having a respectful set of boundaries. That's in this day and age. I mean, come on.
And booksellers are being trained at this conference. There is a panel on de-escalation. So do talk to your bookseller beforehand about how to deal with that, especially if you have sensitive topics.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's, obviously context is everything, but it shouldn't really be your responsibility. Yes. It should be the responsibility of the bookstore. You are our guest coming in, and it's our job to keep you safe and protected from that kind of nonsense.
Yes.
And because I saw a lot of hands go up, and we only have 3 minutes left and there's a lot of noise happening, some of us can stay after to answer questions one-on-one, and we'll have our contact info. I'll put that up actually now so that you can write it down. But Emily, maybe next question?
I had a bit of a comment or a question. I'm slightly different in the sense that I'm actually a bookseller. My name's Jay. I'm from Sydney. I run an event program that we've been doing for about 35 years. We run about 60 to 70 events a year. I just, a comment and a question, certainly going back to shitty events. We've had hundreds of them. And
Thank
one of the
you.
things that I always tell all of these at shitty events is one thing that always happens is the word of mouth and 4 or 5 people that turn up end up into the 50 and 60 books that sell over the next week or two.
Yep.
And if you walk into that event and go, oh my God, there's only 4 people here, and you are not just as engaging and just as on the ball, then the 4 or 5 people that are there are probably going to walk away going, oh yeah, that was a good crap. But if you are just as good with 4 or 5 people, and you will sell a shitload of books after that as well. And my question for the panel is really, even after all this time, we do a run sheet that we send to the publisher, and I know that the publisher 90% of the time does not forward that on.
Correct.
And so when you're managing expectations, they turn up and go, well, where's my conversation partner? And we go, well, that's not our program. You're up there by yourself, mate. How do you deal with making sure that the bloody publisher sends on your expectations?
We are very clear with the publishing house as far as this is if they come to us and ask for an event, we say, this is our event outline. Is the author, and are you comfortable with this? And sometimes I'll get no. Sometimes they want to adjust. Sometimes I'm now asked, can I put a salsa class in the middle of this? And, I think we keep it really simple. We do 45 minutes of conversation, 30 minutes of a signing, and we're done for the most part. That's kind of like how we do a quick turnaround with events. We also have a small space. We can't house a lot, but I think maybe setting up that standard with the publishing so that they know this is what's going to be the expectation. Yes. If you can't fulfill it, I can't have your event, truthfully, because I'm not going to look bad as my store, and I don't want your author to look bad. And they're not going to want their author to look bad because that's a bad representation on them.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry. We are at time. Thank you all for being here, and please join us for private discussions.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!